everyone stand and pledge allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have the roll call, please?
Yes, Madam President. Councilperson Gary Larry.
Present.
Councilperson Michael Kwanzaa.
Hello.
Council President Linda Rashford.
Here.
Councilperson Michael Black.
Here.
Councilperson John A. DeMundi.
Here.
Jimmy Democrata, Mayor.
Present.
Janet Curlin, City Treasurer. William Purcell, City Administrator. Richard McCabe, Chief of Police. Jeff Bergstrom, Building Official and Fire Marshal. Kathy Walls, City Finance Coordinator. Janet Curlin, City Treasurer.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out on this cold and rainy evening. We have a full agenda, so I'm going to get started. I would ask that if you're in the back, please don't talk during the proceedings. We always have a comment section at the end. It's disruptive to people who are trying to listen. I'm going to make a few changes in the order of the agenda. There are two proclamations from the mayor, and I'm going to move those up to the front before minutes and staff reports, and then we're going to go through the audit for for the last fiscal year. So at this point, I'm going to ask the mayor to come forward. It's a privilege tonight to have two proclamations. One is for Gladys Clark, who turns 100. And then this is a mayor and council resolution, and also the one for Arbor Day, which is a very important celebration for a city that loves trees. So I'll ask the mayor to come forward and read the proclamation.
I'm having difficulty with my hearing. Do you want to read that proclamation?
Please, please.
It's really listed as first anyway.
Yes, okay. And I think there's some people here in the audience that came out specially for Gladys Clark, so we'll ask you at the end to come forward. I know she could not be here this evening. She is 100 years old, so we give her a break for that. But
Celebrating the 100th birthday of Gladys Reed Clark. Whereas longevity of life is a blessing for an individual and for the community, which benefits from the knowledge, creativity, and experiences this individual brings to all. And whereas Gladys Clark has had a long and productive lifetime and has demonstrated in countless ways her dedication to the welfare of others and has earned the respect and affection of people from all walks of life and all ages. And whereas Gladys Clark was born in Newcastle, Delaware, on January 9th, 1919. And recently celebrated her 100th birthday. As a lifelong resident, she attended the Booker T. Washington School here in Newcastle, where she started first grade in 1924. Later, she was instrumental in the restoration of the school, which now houses the Newcastle Senior Center. And whereas Gladys Clark's husband, H. Sylvester Clark, was the first African-American to serve on the Newcastle City Council, and she became the first woman to serve on that council after his death in 1974. And whereas Gladys Clark helped form the Community Progressive Club to provide activities for Newcastle's youth, it went on to house the Head Start program and was the original site of the Newcastle Senior Center. For many years, the Progressive Club provided free tutoring to students. Gladys loved working with children and personified her favorite Frederick Douglass quote, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair
here and get their picture made with the mayor.
Jimmy, stand up again.
You're going to get your picture made for the newspaper.
Turn this the other way.
Oh.
Yeah, come on this way. Jeff, can you move the mic out of the way?
Let me move this out just for a sec. I'll move it back in, okay?
Whoa. There we go. You want to hold that up, please, so we can see it here? Hold this. Okay. It's not in front of your face.
Great, thank you.
Would you like to say something on behalf of Gladys?
Amen. We're so elated to the mayor, to the council, and to the trustees of Newcastle to find it thought worthy enough to honor Miss Clark, whom we heard the history of her. She's a black historian in this town who, if you want to know anything about Newcastle, she could tell us. She's been through it all, good times and the bad times. She instilled in us as a black community to, help others, do the best you can, and be fair and honest with your fellow man. And we have taken on the role of trying to bring the Progressive Club up to her standard. Barbara is the president, I'm the vice president, and we're still keep her in our thoughts and minds whenever we make decisions to do anything. And we thank the council down through the years. You supported the breakfast that she had to help raise funds for the Community Progressive Club. And we know the heart of our mayor, longtime friend of Miss Clark for many, many years. And not just him, but his father. And I was born here on 4th Street 73 years ago. And I thank God for being in Newcastle. I don't know any other place I would have rather been than in the city of Newcastle. And we want to thank you on behalf of the family of Mrs. Clark and Mrs. Clark, and we'll see that she gets this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Arbor Day.
I have a proclamation for Arbor Day, proclaiming April 26th as Arbor Day in the city of Newcastle. Whereas, in 1872, J. Sterling Fortune proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was the first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Jimmy Gambacola, as mayor of the city of Newcastle, Delaware, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2019, as Arbor Day in the city of Newcastle, Delaware, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. J. dated this 12th day of February 2019. Give me again before the medal.
Thank you. And as the city does, we'll schedule a day to plant a tree in the city and celebrate even more. Next item is the audit. I'm going to ask partner Vince Bardone with Smith Giordano and Associates to come forward and grab a chair, and then also ask our city treasurer and our finance coordinator, Kathy Wallace, to join us up here too. And all of council has a copy of the audit in their packet. Welcome, Mr. Bardone. I'm glad to see you again and looking forward to hearing your summary.
Mayor, council, and guests, thank you for having me. My name is Vincent Bardone. I'm with the firm of Smith Giordano and Associates. I'm here to present the audit for the year ended June 30th, 2018, compared to June 30th, 2017. I will try to keep it brief. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. I'm happy to report that we've issued unmodified opinions at all levels of our financial report. You'll notice I use the plural opinions because there are multiple levels of reporting, and we've issued unmodified for all of them. For those of you that don't understand what unmodified means, is in simple English terms, it's a clean opinion. There are no exceptions, so that what you see in the audit is true to the best of the results of the audit. So basically, and that's pages 1 and 2. Page 3, those of you that have a copy, is what we term as the government-wide financial statements. Basically, what it does is it takes all the activities of the city with the exclusion of the municipal service commission. That's a separate entity, and it's not included in this report. And basically, as of June 30, 2018, total assets of the city were 37.9, rounded to the nearest 100,000 in total assets, as compared to the prior year 35.5 million. Now, again, it seems like a lot, but most of the 37 million is comprised of approximately 32 million of infrastructure and assets that are needed by the city to conduct its business. Respectively, the total liabilities for the year were 2.938, and the prior year were $1 million. But what I need to clarify is it seems like the liability increased by 1.9 million. But basically, what it is that is a bond that was floated by the city for the street program, which will commence in fiscal year 2019. And respectively, the assets went up by almost the same amount because as of June 30th, the money had not been spent yet, but the financing was required so that it would be ready for project. So if you exclude that event, basically the total assets and total liabilities are pretty consistent with the prior year. When you take the total assets minus the liabilities, you have what we call what's left or available to fund future budgets. And if you look at the bottom of page 3, when we exclude all the funds that are restricted for specific purposes and the investments in net capital assets and net of debt, you have approximately $3 million that's available to balance future budgets. And that's pretty much on page 3 of your balance sheet or statement of acquisition. go to page 6. This is the balance sheet that you use normally to budget on a year-to-year basis. And it's the same information that is on page 3, with the exceptions of long-term assets and liabilities. The theory behind this is so that what we try to show on page 6 is what's available to be used for your operation on an annual basis. So if you look at the general fund, which is column 1, the third number from the bottom, according to this, the amount of fund balance that is unassigned is 2.9. And that's basically the number you want to look at to determine if you're deficit spending or not. And I'm happy to report that you're not. You have available $2.9 million to balance future budgets. And if you look at your total expenditures on an annual basis, which can fluctuate between $4 and $5 million. And the reason why I say fluctuate is because sometimes you have federal grants that kind of distort the operation. So on average, it's 4.5. You approximately have 6 months to 7 months of operating surplus. And normally, what everybody recommends is a 6-month surplus, so that way, in case of unforeseen events, such as storms, ice storms like that, in the early 90s, which impacted a lot of governments. So you want to have a certain amount of surplus. So that way, you don't want to be at the mercy of, should I say, the banks and you borrow money if you don't have it. So based on what I've seen, and as a result of the audit, the city is healthy but not wealthy. So it's in a good footing to go forward. On page 8, this is basically your statement about revenue and expenses. And I know there's a lot of numbers, but if you factor out the first column on page 8 from the left, if you factor out the $1.9 million, basically the city had a surplus from its general fund operation of approximately $160,000 a year. As compared to the prior year of $784. Now the reason the surplus is much less, if you look in that first column there, the city spent close to $400,000 for street program. So if you add that back in, it's pretty close, or a little shy of last year. Other than that, that's pretty much the financial position and activity. Pages 10 to 14, I'll just do a quick overview. It's basically the accounting policies we developed those numbers. Page 15 gives you the status of your cash position. And I'm happy to report that it's all FDIC insured. If not FDIC insured, it is collateralized by the bank, which you have an agreement with them to do so. The only thing that's uninsured is your bank cash of $300. So that's cash on hand. I'm sure that's fine. Page 16 gives you a summary of all your assets, the $52 million I spoke of on page 3. Page 17, at the top of page 17, you have a summary of all your debts as of June 30th, what needs to be paid within the next 12 months, and what is long-term and payable greater than 1 year. And then the rest of page 17 and 18 gives you a detail of each debt commitment. Top of page 19, our standards require that we have to summarize for the first 5 years and then in increments of 5 years what your total debt is, meaning principal and interest, and basically, in layman's terms, what you need is approximately $300,000 budgeted for fiscal year 19. If you look at the top of page 19, and then $271 for 20 to 25 for 22 and 2023. But a majority of the debt will be reimbursed by the trustees. So it may look onerous, but it's not. So if you factor out the commitment of the 1 million, so basically your debt is probably not going to that. Pages 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. It's disclosure related to the pension fund. Ask me why we have to do all this. I have no idea, but that's what they have us do. But I'll be more than happy to explain everything in there. That's what I'm not an actuary. But the one thing on page 19, what I want to state is that your pension liability in 2017 was $369,000, and in 2018 it was $302,000. Now again, you have no control over that liability because you're part of the state system and they actually dictate how much you contribute on an annual basis. So, but it's safe to say that your pensions are close to full funded. Page 27 are your lease arrangements, both as lessee and lessor. Page 20, top of 28 are your commitments and contingencies. And then there's something that's highlighted or shaded. We have not received a response from the attorney yet. In all fairness, we just sent it yesterday. Under the new standards, we were able to send it before. Now we have to time it correctly in order to date the report. That's the way it is now. And pages 28 and 29, these are all the new standards that may or may not impact the city going forward. Page 30 is your general fund budget to actual. And what we've done this year is something new, where we've explained the differences that are 10% or more of the budgeted amount. And then you'll see a number next to the fourth column on the right. And then we've explained it on page 31. I don't know if you want me to go into detail, or I'm happy to report that we have a favorable variance. In English term, it means you did better than you had projected you would. So that's basically it.
That's good.
Pages 32, 33, 34, and 35. This is what we call RSI, Required Supplementary Information. We have defined benefit plans. This is required disclosure. Since the standards were adopted in 2016, over the years, we will accumulate data up to 10 years, and then it will stay at 10 years, so to show you the trends of your key pension fund. So pages 32 and 33 is for the one, which is the police pension plan, and 34 and 35 refers to the non-police or civilian. We're almost there. Pages 36 to 41. This is actually optional information, but I feel that it is important to the funding sources that you show accountability of all the grants that are provided to you, whether it be from the federal, state, or county in some cases. So I feel that even though it's optional, it is important to show that the external community that the city of Newcastle is sincere and does track its funding sources. Overall, I think the city had a good year, as was 2017. We have no really issues to report. From time to time, we do make recommendations to make the audit process smoother or easier, but there are no, what we
that's good news.
That's pretty much my report. I think that was concise.
Does the treasurer or the finance coordinator have any questions or comments?
As a result of the meeting we had with management, we made a couple of changes, and we added the disclosure that the trustees would reimburse you.
Right.
And then we also added the first time this year, which I included in my presentation, is that you do have a memorandum of understanding with the Municipal Services Commission of the properties that they use are owned by the city.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Carbone?
Are you really sincere when you say the city is in good financial shape when $2.5 million of the monies that was used to create that are not city operating taxes, overhead? These are stipends from trustees, from MSC. The city is not being run on its own. Do you consider that? No. Do you consider that healthy? Where our budget is $2.5 million of it, almost half of it, is like stipends rather than operating monies.
Yeah, the Municipal Services Commission does subsidize the city.
$650.
Right. At the same time, the Municipal Services Commission exists at the wishes of City Council. It is part of. Actually, when I first started with Hagerty and Hagerty, I used to audit. We called it the power of
Board
Board
of Water and Light.
Board of Water and Light.
We used to bid guard steel to get a couple
But in
$100,000.
response, this is a structure that's set up by a lot of governments. Some governments don't choose to spin out or spun out the water or utilities. They keep it as part of the city government. So, and they exist to serve the public of the city. It's not that it exists on its own. Without the city, it would not exist.
Well, I can tell you, I'm glad they're separate because they run a real good ship.
So does the city.
Absolutely. No, they don't run a good ship when your $2.5 million aren't even included in your operating monies. This town is $2.5 million in a hole if they didn't get that money from the trustees and MSC. Is that the way to run a business? Is that the way to run a business?
Most municipalities are.
Well, I know the United States government's $1 trillion in debt. Is that the way you should run a business? Not the way I run a business. I run a business. When I take money in, I have so much money to spend. I don't beg, borrow, and steal off people to balance budgets.
Here's from my perspective from doing governments for 38 years. The alternative you have is either let the streets deteriorate, or you either fund it through a debt issuance, or you assess the taxpayer.
How to generate an income? How to generate an income? How? Millions of different ways how to generate income. Do you think every city is run like this? It's run on a stipend that we beg, borrow. Let's stay through the end of the meeting. You'll hear us pass a tin cup around trying to get more money.
But if you look at your primary source of income, what is it? Property tax.
Property taxes.
So what do you suggest?
$3 million.
So what do you suggest? Double the property taxes to fund the street program?
75% of property taxes are commercial and industrial. Why not?
That's a choice.
Why not?
What we're talking about audit this evening is common for cities to get grants. We do get funding from the state, from the trust, and from others. So, do we have any other questions from the Mr. Carana?
That's a question, and I think the treasurer, who's the people's representative to check and balance the staff and work like this. It didn't sound like you found any material weaknesses in anything. Okay, so the materiality tests have all been met. Two, did you see any systemic issues or any kind of checks and balances issues, and there's enough redundancy and double checking? And then third, would you feel differently, or would you have to restate anything if the solicitor identified any pending litigation or any open
We're not
judgments?
aware of it.
Right.
We're not aware of any, but normally what happens is, as part of the audit process, if you have legal fees,
Right.
we're required to obtain legal representation. But based on our inquiries and observation, we're not aware of anything that would change the audit.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Appreciate it very
Thank you.
much. Thank you very much, Ms. Wells and Ms. Carlin. And we're going to, at this point, I'm going to tie the two agenda items together. I'm going to ask for a motion to consider Resolution 2019-04. It's a resolution to approve the fiscal year 2018 financial audit that we just heard.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second for Mr. Platt. So I'm going to read the resolution, and this is a resolution to approve fiscal year 2018 financial audit, whereas the firm of Whistler, Giordano & Associates completed the fiscal year 2018 financial audit, and Mr. Vincent Barbone, CPA, has reviewed the draft audit with the City Council at a public meeting held on Tuesday, February 12, 2019. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council hereby approves the fiscal year 2018 financial audit. I'm going to ask for all those in favor to indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. It's unanimous then that we have approved the financial audit. I'm going to return to our normal agenda sequence, and the first thing is, do I have a motion on the minutes?
I would like to make one correction. On page 3, it states Councilman Platt stated he's more concerned about vacant houses where trash is a problem opposed to where it is not. The discussion that I started at the last meeting was not about vacant houses. It was about houses that have untagged vehicles in the driveways, backyards, motorboats, trailers, trash, that type of thing. It did morph into vacant homes, but that was not my concern about vacant homes as far as that goes.
So would appropriately you say that is more concerned, that Councilperson Platt is more concerned about trash?
No, I'm more concerned about quality of life issues as far as, like I said, boats that haven't been moved in 2 or 3 years, vehicles that are not that are not tagged sitting in backyards, sitting in driveways, flat tires, that type of thing. These houses are lived in or part of neighborhoods, but they just seem like they can store whatever they want in their backyards, and I guess there is property rights, and that's fine. But no, vacant houses were not my point of view.
Should we just remove the word vacant and maybe the word more? You are concerned about houses that?
Or just quality of life issues? How would you like it rephrased?
I would like a phrase with vehicles that are not tagged properly, boats that have not been moved, and, as far as that would go.
And trash?
And trash.
Okay.
You're making a correction.
We are.
Or changing what you said.
We're making a correction. I never said this.
Okay. Any other changes to the minutes? This is a correction. The minutes are to reflect the actual meeting. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. The minutes have been approved unanimously. Next is the treasurer. I'll ask the treasurer to come forward, please.
This is the unaudited treasurer's report as of January 31st, 2019. The unrestricted funds, $3,922,600.35. Total restricted funds, $2,407,619.26. Total cash in the account, $6,393,219.61. The long-term debt is a total of $2,000,000. $38,178. This includes the amount that the trust will be paying back, which right now is at $1,770,376. This long-term debt is inclusive of the street sweeper, which, as you all know, we started paying for last month.
Any questions for the treasurer?
What was the long-term debt a year ago compared to the 300?
46,000, probably, it was less than that. $46,830, probably.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report unaudited as presented? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Leary. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have unanimously approved the treasurer's report as presented. Okay, next I'm going to ask for reports from city administrator and staff.
Okay,
Mr. Bartho?
thank you, Madam President. I have two items to share with council. Number one is just a follow-up to DelDOT's presentation. I think it was last month in regard to the railroad crossing safety improvement project that they presented to council. They have set a date for a public meeting, which is next month, Monday, March 18th, at the Newcastle Elementary School from 4 to 7. And we will be sending mailers to all residents within the city, in addition to what DelDOT is also publishing, and of course, in the local papers. The other item that I wanted to share with council is this. As you recall from your discussions concerning Delaware Street, we were asked, actually the city architect was asked to go and discuss the project with SHPO. She has, and I just want to review with council what those discussions basically amounted to. What she did was, and of course the city architect, Layla Hammaroon, reviewed the design with Lynn Riley, who's a senior division planner with the state, and then Suzanne Savory, who's the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs Deputy Director. Basically what Ms. Hammaroon explained to both of these folks was that, number one, she addressed the fact that the intent of the project is to address vehicular traffic issues, provide a better pedestrian experience, and to, number three, be proactive as a responsible steward of the environment with stormwater management improvements that meet Secretary of the Interior standards. The feedback Ms. Hammaroon received from both of these folks was this: they understand the concepts laid out in the plan and supporting documentation and are comfortable with the design. They see the project as a traffic calming and pedestrian safety improvement project with stormwater treatment component, which they believe is pretty straightforward. They do not see the project affecting the historic character of Newcastle. Hence, they think that the bump outs provide better viewpoints to look down Delaware Street towards the river and a better viewpoint both of and from the front of City Hall. They're also fine with having the green features in lieu of trees on the courthouse side of the sidewalk. They did point out in regard to the space in front of the David Finney Inn that basically what was labeled a sidewalk patio is a matter of local zoning and / code use and not a design issue from their perspective. And then finally, Ms. Savory did raise the question of who would carry the cost of the green features to be installed on the courthouse sidewalk, and of course we have made that clear, I think, from the beginning that that would be something that would be maintained by the city. So I think that was the last piece of what it is you, council, was waiting for in regards to the project, and from what you had discussed, I guess the last time Mr. Athey was here and we talked about the project a couple of months ago. So I'm just reporting back as requested.
Any questions?
Is the madam suggest a way that she's going to pay the $330,000 to make the fish happy by filtering the water under Delaware Street?
No, I don't think she mentioned that.
Oh, I figured that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. The next thing that I'd like to, and that's all I have. I'll just ask Jeff to maybe present some webpage information, updates that we did concerning floodplain management, and anything else you might have.
First of all, the roof is just wonderful. Secondly, in an effort to make the city's floodplain management more transparent and easily accessible to people who use the internet more,
Mr. Bertram?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would ask, I don't know if the paper will accommodate you, but I would ask if you could spend some time with them because, as you know, buying flood insurance for a residential property or commercial property is not an inexpensive endeavor. It's also very, very challenging to get, as many insurance companies have exited the market. So I think the more information we can get out to the community would be helpful. So if you wouldn't mind contacting them and maybe sitting down and explaining a little bit about this of what's in it for the residents and commercial businesses, I think that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Some small exception that the people that choose to buy flood insurance sometimes most often are those that aren't in the floodplain, and in that situation, flood insurance is very much.
Right.
To cover you for wind-driven rain and for localized flooding that can happen anybody's house. When there's the unfortunate series of events like a snowstorm, piles water up around your house,
Right.
So it's a good thing to do. It's not always really expensive.
I think it's a good point. I understand 30% of the people who get flooded are not in the floodplain.
Yes, and sometimes it's disastrous result because you weren't planning for it. You have an elevator, your mechanical equipment out of the basement, all kinds of things can go wrong.
It's actually a very good page. Thank you for working on that, the staff. So I think hope it's helpful, and if there's any feedback, please provide that to City Administrator.
Chief?
Thank you. Quickly, I just wanted to address an issue that the police and the fire department are trying to create something for the springtime, a drug awareness program that we want to try to target some of the younger generation to put something together. We're going to try to identify a neutral spot somewhere in the city. Then once we come up with a plan, hope to post it, and then hopefully we can get folks to like it, share it, and spread the word. So we ask that maybe keep an eye out on that, and we welcome any input that you might have for that. In summary, January's highlights, we had a very productive month. I do want to apologize for a typo. In year to date, traffic arrests was, that's actually the accurate number, 438, 472 at the top of the typo. Our traffic arrests look like they doubled for a few reasons. One is we're targeting some of the issues that folks are bringing to us, the passing on the right, speed in certain areas, some of the quality of life things that we've been hearing about. The other is we've had access to a few highway safety grants that allowed us to put extra cars out on the street that target specific violations, speed, DUIs, and stuff like that. So we ended up with, I think, 4 DUIs this month. One of them was a 5th offense, felony DUI. All the productivity has created we've stopped a lot of folks that need to be off the road. Somebody that wanted for a vehicular homicide, managed to get them into custody. So overall, it's very productive.
Quick question. Chief, over the last year or two, we've had an awful lot of activity around illegal drugs. I appreciate the department's emphasis on that. I noticed when I was going through the report this time, seems to be an awful lot that has pivoted, not to say the drug problem is solved by any stretch of the imagination, but there's an awful lot here that has to do with thefts and things like that in Van Dyke and other places around the city, but I noticed several in Van Dyke Village in particular. So do you have any comments about that? Was it just a few people, or any thoughts about that?
Well, when we filtered the quality of life map, not a whole lot showed up in the residential areas, which we were kind of excited about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the thefts, in the commercial areas are things that just, it's
happen in commercial areas.
It happens in commercial areas.
Right.
But we were pleased to see that there wasn't a whole lot of heat in the residential areas as far as that is concerned. So we saw no trends with the theft. I think overall we were looking at maybe 25 calls that were quality of life calls in the residential areas. So.
Okay. It just jumped out to me as a few more than is typical. Normally it was a lot more about drugs, less about burglaries. This seems to be much more about thefts and robberies and burglaries and less about drugs.
Are you looking at?
I'm looking at the detail, not the maps.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the different incidents and stuff like that. But I'm happy I would trust what you say. I'm happy to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, no, we feel like just our presence and the amount of movement we had kind of helped deter a little bit.
Good.
Any Other questions for the chief?
Chief, I will say it's pretty impressive to see the guys out there working hard. I said to Mr. Barthel one day last week, and I mentioned it to you earlier in the week, there was a time it seemed like there was a lull where they weren't hustling, stopping cars, doing things, and they're out there. You see them every day out there working hard, so just give them our thanks.
Is there any questions from the audience? I have one question. If you could come identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Reverend Williams, Andrew Williams. I just wanted to address what Jeff was saying about the flood insurance.
Okay.
Because it was my understanding that a flood, if it wasn't a creek or a river that overflowed, then it's not a flood. So it could rain 40 days and 40 nights and just come down the street, and the insurance wouldn't cover it because it's not a flood. A flood is only when the river or a creek. So a lot of times people buy it and they're not covered, especially in basements. They cover very few in basements. So misunderstanding? Okay. Not right. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, Jeff is a great resource if you have questions about your own house or want to see the maps. He's very, very helpful in that. And at this point, any public questions from the chief? We're going to move on. And I would encourage you, if you have any concerns, don't, call 911. Don't tell me or any of the members of council 5 days later. We really can't do anything about it. But please call 911, even if you just see someone suspicious or you think there's a trend. Do that for an immediate issue, and certainly you can contact the police station. So thank you very much. Any other thing?
No, ma'am.
Okay. At this point, it's council communications. Any on the council would like to share?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mendy.
I just have one. I just wanted to again add my thanks to Sylvester and Gladys Clark, and appreciate all of their commitment to the city and their contributions. Also, it is February is Black History Month, and a hat tip and a mention to the Pettys, the Pinketts. I had the pleasure to work with Vera Worthy on the Planning Commission, Florence Smith, who also served on the Planning Commission, Reverend Aaron Moore on our Committee on Standards and Ethics. We've had a number of people who've been very involved in city life over the decades, so I just want to give them a shout out publicly, this being February and Black History Month, so thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. DeMundi.
This is the start of some concerns from a number of citizens, and I brought it to the attention of Mr. Baldini, and I feel comfortable in relating to it because he signed the response as chairman of the Planning Commission personally. If it was a personal email, I wouldn't disclose it. He signed it as the Planning Commission chairman, and so I feel comfortable reading it and as a response to my concerns. I've been asked by a number of concerned citizens to bring the matter of a lack of interaction on listed agenda items at the onset of your committee's discussion and deliberations of these items to council for discussion, and motions to have your committee be in step with our protocol of having discussions on agenda items before. And I don't believe Mr. Baldini responded that he was agreeable to that. Rather than that, I'm asking Mr. Baldini and the other commission chairs to consider having the same protocol as City Council and allow limited, say 3 minutes per citizen or so, opinion and or discussion on agenda items only, as we do. Certainly it seems in line with the democratic society, and if City Council does it, I don't see why there are auxiliary commissions and boards don't follow the same protocol. It's awful frustrating to sit there and not being able to give your opinion on something that's going to come up and be voted on before you even had a chance to open your mouth. And I've been in meetings like that, believe me, especially lately. and I asked him to call me or contact me to see if we could come to some sort of meeting of our minds. Mr. Baldini responded to me as chairman of the Planning Commission. The suggestion by your concerned citizens that there is no interaction between the Planning Commission and the public on agenda items is grossly inadequate. The degree in which public comment to the Commission is appropriate will depend on what then of application is being discussed and what is required by the Commissioners to make an informed decision on the presented materials. This is something that is addressed by case basis, the substance of which I'm saying is easily verified through the Planning Commission minutes. Because the Commission deals with the forward-looking issues as well as current and sometimes controversial ones, the Commission standard agendas format allows the Commission the flexibility to deal more effectively with the topics as they come to the Commission. Similar to the City's agenda, the Commission's format does contain the same notation that the agenda items as listed may not be considered in sequence as such. This and the above should demonstrate the Commission is serving all the parties fairly as we perform the duties of the Commission. And my response to that is short and sweet. Thank you for your response, but it does not address my concerns that the preview and comment by the public is arbitrary. It's not consistent. City Council allows comments on any listed agenda item, not pick and choose. I prefer the same format, and ask City Council for a motion that all City Commissions follow the City Council's protocol and permit limited discussion and options on listed items only.
The commissions are independent from council, and they have their own rules. They establish different rules for each commission. We appoint people to the commissions. They also have resources such as planners, architects, and legal resources, and our power is in the appointment process.
We are responsible for policing these commissions, that they're giving the public the service they deserve. And they deserve to have a comment or opinion on any listed agenda items, not arbitrarily say, you can talk about this one, but not this one. You know, it's the rule of council, and it should follow down to the commissions. And I ask for a motion and a second.
Well, we're at council communications, right?
Right. So,
I mean, I'm not unwilling to have the conversation, but we're in council communications piece of the agenda. I mean, I'm not unwilling to have that discussion. I also think at some point maybe Mr. Baldini, if he feels so moved, he could talk about it. I also personally feel like, you can organize a meeting to fit the agenda items, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I also know that there's a lot of folks that avail themselves, as they should, to come visit with members of those commissions well in advance of a meeting. I'm looking out, and I've had several conversations with folks in this room on multiple occasions about multiple issues in advance of a meeting. I will sometimes initiate that because you want to make better informed decisions. So there's a lot of ways to get communications. It's not all just at a formal meeting, but I take the point. I think it's an interesting point. So maybe at the right time of the meeting, we could have that motion or have that discussion.
since we've opened it up, Mr. Baldini, would you like to make a comment? Well, Mr. DeMundi brought the topic up.
Yes, and Mr. DeMundi and I, we respectfully disagree. And to that point that he has made, we do allow public comment on all of those issues where appropriate and germane to the topic that we are discussing.
Excuse me.
To the topic that we're discussing. So, from my perspective, the public input comes after the applicant does his presentation, the city planner and or building inspector does their presentation. The planners ask, or the commission then asks its questions, and at that time the public comment has been sought. They have the most accurate and real-time information so that their questions can be more relevant than if they are at the very beginning of the meeting. Because at that point, they don't have all of the data that's available. They don't have the nuances that are in the presentation. After that input, the commission does its deliberation and it does its decisions. From that perspective, I feel that it is much more beneficial to all parties to do it this way. The agenda floats, yes, depending on the issues. If they are controversial issues, as is the parking lot, yes, there's more public input. If it's a site plan review, that is a matter of compliance. Not a whole lot of conversation has to be about that. Controversial issues like cell towers. We had a meeting back in November of 17 on cell towers. Not citizen one showed up. Asked for public comment to no one. So, again, we are here worrying about the format of an agenda. Mr. DeMondi's point now of all of the commissions having the same kind of format, that is interesting, and that could be, if that is what you decide, that you are consistent across the board, that is a decision that you make. But from the Planning Commission right here, right now, my perspective is I am doing in the best interest of all concerned by having that public comment come in the moment of the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate all the work you're doing and the rest of the Planning Commission. Any other comments, Mr. DeMondi?
I think the key word there is arbitrary. Who makes the arbitrary decision?
Well, we're not going to have a back and forth. That's the end. That's the end.
To that point,
You make the arbitrary decision.
I am the facilitator of the meeting.
Not an elected official.
There it is.
There it is. Join
I
the
am the facilitator of that meeting, and I decide what keeps that on tack and moving.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. I mean, as you know, as I'm the facilitator of this meeting and I move some items around, I ask for extra comments, to see if people had comments for the police chief. So that you keep things moving forward. So thank you for those comments. Anything else, Mr. DeMondi? Okay. Anyone else like to share anything?
I have a few things to share.
Okay.
First, I want to start off with a letter to the Weekly. It was from a business owner of the hair salon at 7th and Delaware, and there was a couple of inaccuracies that I would like to clear, and it's not the paper's fault, it was what was written. The first one I'd like to clear is that she said that she knows of a handicapped woman on Bold Avenue that is having a handicapped parking place taken away from her. Semi-true. The parking spot was put in a no parking zone to accommodate her during construction of Bold Avenue. Once they tore it up, whatever, her driveway was kind of inaccessible, so the parking spot was given to her. Bold Avenue is completed. Her driveway is fully accessible, so it is time for that parking spot to come out. If said individual thinks she needs a parking spot, just like anybody else in the city, they can come forward to council, put the application in, and we'll vote on it and make that decision at that point. So that's the inaccuracy I'd like to do. The accurate things I'd like to discuss is there is a major problem between tenants, between a hairdressing salon, the pizza place, and a councilman. And it revolves around the parking lot at 7th or on 7th Street next to in front of the pizza place. It's a city-owned parking spot, approximately 8 to 10 parking spots. 2 of them have signs in front of them saying that they are 2-hour parking. So out of the 8 parking spots, 6 you can park there all day. If I choose to put my car there all day as a city resident or somebody visiting, that is my prerogative. The other 2 are 2-hour parking spots. I checked with the chief. He kind of agrees with me. I don't want to put words in your mouth, chief, but you said it would be just the same if one of them handicapped or if one of this had a handicap sign in it. You couldn't park there unless you were handicapped. So that's what that debate's about. So according to the owner of the salon, our councilman, said that he was on official business. He was staking things out, and when she went to take his picture, he just flipped her the bird on official business in his own line. My question would be, what official business were you on, and why you would flip a citizen a bird, and why you
It's called the First Amendment.
correct, and why you try to send these, although legal, highly immoral.
To
And-
you?
and-
People-
no, to everyone,
somebody
to
lines
everyone,
up in a
to
cellar?
everyone, to everyone.
Immoral?
You cheat on taxes, Mr. Money.
Mr. Platt
So,
has the
so
floor.
that's fine, and you can say what you want because
I will say
there's
what I want to.
more, and you have that. And I would defend that right. I defend the entire Constitution. And like I said, it may be legal, highly immoral. And the other thing is, it's funny that you only pick fights with older women. You sent emails to all council.
I'm a lot older
Excuse
than
me.
her.
Excuse me.
I'm
You-
10 years older than her. So how do you say she's an older woman? I'm 76 years old. She's only 60-something. How do you say older women? Why do you say older
Sorry, I
women?
did not interrupt you.
you
Mr.
wanna
Platt
change your mind about that?
Mr.
No.
Platt has, Mr. Platt finished.
And
I'm
then
tired of his gabbling.
And it's funny because when you have nothing intelligent to say, you just attack
Why don't
people.
you ask him why he won't
So-
give him a ticket?
Because they're
No,
parked legally.
no, you're crazy. Those
No, I'm
two,
not.
No, it's not those two parking spots. That whole area was deemed 2-hour parking. You're going to say no cars on Delaware Street get a ticket because there's only a sign in front of one of them?
They say
You don't even make sense.
Yes, I do, Mr. DeMonte,
No, you don't.
because I looked at this.
Go back to the resolution.
Okay.
Go back to the resolution.
Let Mr.
You're
Platt
saying
finish.
2 signs are there and it's only 2 spots? Come on, where'd you bring that up from her?
Mr. DeMonte, I am not a lady that you're going to bully. I hate to say that. If you go to Delaware Street,
They're getting loud up there.
excuse me, if you go to Delaware Street between 4th and 5th, there are signs
Excuse
that
me,
say
Mr. Platt has the floor.
that says there are 2-hour parking between signs. So that means sign here, 2-hour parking. If you go to the lot up at 7th in Delaware, them sign says 2-hour parking, period. They do not say anything about time frame or anything else. So that's why that's there. So, okay? And then the last thing I have to say is you send some raunchy emails once again.
First Amendment, dude.
I've
First Amendment,
already
dude.
agreed that.
Why don't you say this stuff in public so I can sue you?
I'm saying it in public.
There you go.
And
It's on the record.
once again, speaking of suing,
Excuse me, can I have
no, it's not,
quiet
man.
in the
This
back?
is my time.
This is Mr.
And-
Platt's time. Excuse me, no comments from the back, please.
And the last thing I have to say, once again, picking on women, and I will be happy to share any emails that Mr. DeMonte has put out there. He attacks the Weekly for no reason. He claims this Weekly defamed him. This Weekly did not defame Mr. DeMonte. This lady wrote a letter to the Weekly. They published it. That is not defamation. And like I said, Mr. DeMonte, I will defend your right to First Amendment, but it's just sad that you have to act like that. Because this is
I
sad.
didn't give her the
This is sad.
permission to print
This
that
is
letter.
sad.
I didn't give
This
her
is sad.
permission to print that letter.
But it happened. It's accurate. And there's the proof.
I didn't give her permission to print that letter.
She doesn't have to.
She never even contacted me.
Doesn't have to. First Amendment.
What, you a
This is
lawyer
sad.
now?
This is
You
sad.
think you learned the law in the Undertaker cellar?
I'm done, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a comment for council communications? Okay, let's move on. I have a letter I'd like to read as business from the council president. This is a letter to me as council president from council member Michael Carana. Dear President Ratchford, in accordance with Section 6 of the Charter of the City of Newcastle, I'm notifying you and the city of my resignation from City Council for the purpose of declaring my candidacy for the office of mayor in the April 13, 2019 election. It is my intention that the effective date of my resignation shall not be immediate in nature, but rather be consistent with the timing mechanism set forth in Section 6 of the Charter. The letter is dated January 29th. As you remember, we made some charter changes, including a resign to run requirement, and this basically says that if someone wishes to seek another office and they're still in their current term, then they would need to resign and their resignation would be effective basically when all the new officers assumed their responsibilities. So that is all I have this evening, and we'll go on to the next agenda item, which is a resolution to request funding from the trustees of Newcastle Common. Excuse me. I do have business from the floor regarding agenda items, and we'll have comments on the at the end on any topic. So the remaining agenda item is a resolution to request a funding commitment from the trustees of Newcastle Common. Is there someone that would like to make a comment? Excuse me.
You got the tree?
Excuse me, Mr. Bertram. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed one. Excuse me. I have lots of notes in my paper. I'm going to go back, and at this point, there's one other item. There's a motion and a vote on Resolution 2019-01, which will be the first item, regarding a council appointment to the Tree Advisory Commission. So thank you, Mr. Bergstrom. That will be the next agenda item, and then the only other agenda item is a resolution to request trust funding. Yes, comment on the agenda items are permitted now.
My name is Dorothy Fisk, and I live at 26 East 3rd Street. As a trustee until last December, I retain an interest in and information on the holdings of the trust and their use. Currently, the President of Council and the Executive Committee of the Trustees are committing large sums in which all of us as beneficial owners of the trust have an interest to be spent on city projects. Council should have found the funds for these projects either by raising taxes or by acquiring a bond. Council can borrow up to $3 million without a referendum. Much of the problem of Newcastle streets has been caused by the lack of infrastructure repairs over the years. This is a responsibility of Council in which it has been derelict. At last year's trustee budget meeting, we considered the city's request for $1.2 million to do some Delaware street work. At that point, Mr. Wilson, the president of the trustees, asked that the amount be changed to $2 million. It was clear to several of us that there had been private discussions with someone on council, which the board as a whole had not been privy to. Several trustees, including me, objected, saying that over the years the city has been slow in handling funds given by the trustees. I quote roughly from the minutes. One commented that there will always be more projects for the city. Another stated we cannot ignore the city government's lack of capacity to get the work done. He cited their request for an extension to finish ADA-compliant curb work, which has still not been finished, I think. Ms. Fisk cited the stormwater project as another example of foot dragging. She also said that infrastructure is the responsibility of the city, and they are trying to avoid raising taxes. Another trustee supported giving them what they asked for, the $1.2 million, but not the extra amount. They can return later, he said, to ask for additional funding. Mr. Wilson said that he had talked to them, and their reason for not asking for more was for fear of being perceived as greedy. That's rather humorous when you realize that considering this new $675,000 request, a slush fund if the state comes through with funding, and the extra $250,000 recently added by the trustees to fund the 3rd Street parking lot requested by council. The trustees have committed nearly $3 million for city projects in the past year. Some trustees and some council members have made the trust the city's cash cow. However, the trust purse is not bottomless. The trust should be used for important projects the city can handle, like shoreline protection. The $2 million gift to the city passed 7-6. Now, less than a year later, the city wants more. When will it end? When the trust coffers are empty? These assets belong to everyone in Newcastle. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Anyone else wish to make a comment? If you would identify yourself and sign in, please.
My name is Roderick Gillespie. I live on West 4th Street. I'm commenting concerning the $675,000 addition to the project. I presume, and the request from the trustees to fund the project, I presume that the AECom has just recently made a preliminary estimate of their work. Is that
You were
correct?
at that meeting, sir, I think, when they did. And I think the number that
I didn't hear the figure, but I don't doubt
believe
what
you were.
you. Right. Well, that's great. Okay, so that had been done some time ago. Now I have just a few questions about the project. One, I'd like to know the limits other than the pier. Where does it go down towards Newark, Delaware? 6th Street. I think that question was raised by a councilman.
It would what we have been talking at other meetings goes from the wharf area to
Right.
3rd Street. The agenda items referring to paving and curbs all the way to 6th.
All the way to 6th.
Right,
Okay.
from 3rd to 6th.
Okay, so it is the 6th. I'd like to know, now this is a sort of a nuts and bolts thing. Somebody should know this, maybe the manager. The question is, since you're trying to improve this town to get people to come into it, to improve the general level of commerce, so you want to welcome tourists, my question is, what are you going to do about the curbs and the sidewalks in this project? How far back? You're going to have to adjust a lot of curbing. You also have quite a bit of concrete curbing on that far side of Delaware Street. I don't know what you're going to put back in, whether it's going to be concrete or granite. So I'm interested in what your plans are. I assume the engineer is going to want to have all his curbing to standard highway specs as far as the height and everything. So does anyone know this?
We expect granite curbing.
All the way?
But everything's in engineering right now. So
okay, but the question of how far back, he's going to have to adjust that sidewalk. He can't just adjust the curb and then have a 2-inch drop down to brick.
That's included in the estimate because, right, you have to make sure the slope is
Right,
correct.
you have to
for
be
drainage
reasonable.
purposes.
Correct, okay, I want to clarify that. Okay, I'm just following some notes here from an email. Since you seem to be going over quite a bit, and I'm actually expecting to hear that maybe the city will want more money at some time in the future. I would suggest to you, we went through this, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse. These, I call them peninsulas or fingers for the pedestrians. Allegedly, they protect the public. There was actually no clear accident history involving pedestrians and cars out here. There was something said about cars backing up. I presume that was into other cars. I never heard anything about a pedestrian being hit at one of these crosswalks. I drive through them all the time, and the little device you have there, I call them cipher men. You know, they're sort of funny human figures you have in the middle of the road. It seems like everything's fine. I don't see that many pedestrians using it. I don't see the hazard. Because of that, I suggest that you put those islands on or whatever they are, peninsulas. And also, as an aside, I don't see what the grass actually does. If you're going to build something, it should stand up, it should actually do something, and it should look good. Now, all I see out there is it sort of looks cute to have grass out there. I never see this. I've been in a lot of towns in this world, and I've never seen anything like that. So I would suggest to you, it's just a suggestion, that you consider that those 4 little fingers or peninsulas as a delete option, because you may run into budget problems later on this project. So that's my point. Also, the other point is, with those fingers or peninsulas, you are adding 2 stop signs. You have no stop signs now. Stop signs actually create accidents, rear-end accidents. So I think any traffic engineer will tell you that. I got that out of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, that they actually create accidents.
Okay, we're going to have to...
Fine. Thank you very much for your time. I wanted to make these points to you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make comments? If you'd limit your comments to...
1 minute. How you guys been? I haven't been up here for quite a while.
Where you been?
I got problems my own at home. Drugs is everywhere. Look, in the last month or so, we've been having some issues in Dobbinville, not only with drugs, but concerning firearms also. And the police are acting on it the best they can, but their hands are tied because of this right to carry law in the state of Delaware. By Newcastle being its own municipality, and other states don't govern that, a lot of states don't allow you to open carry. I'm wondering if there's any way that our council and our lawyer and our police chief can get together and try to prohibit open carry of a firearm within city limits. I see Mr. Platt shaking his head, and I was kind of scared to come up here and ask this question because everybody was talking about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. Regardless of what the Second Amendment says, this can be stopped within our town, the open carry law, because other states don't have open carry laws, so if they can have it, we can sure have it in our town. We're our own municipality, we make our own laws. This problem with these knuckleheads carrying these guns around is no good. I had to call the police to Dobbinville a week and a half ago. My 10-year-old grandson was walking from our park in Dobbinsville past a piece of ground that also owned the park, and witnessed 2 young men exchanging a handgun. Now, my thing is, they fall back on the right, they have the right to bear firearms. Good for them, anywhere but the city of Newcastle. I'm asking council to give it to the lawyer and do whatever you can do to make it a prohibit that you are not to open carry in the city of Newcastle. They're already passing out way too many concealed weapons. Cops don't even know what they're walking up on anymore. 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, 2 guys in the car, one exercising his right to carry, the other one's got his hidden. We got to step on this now before it goes any further. The people in Washington ain't doing nothing about the guns. The first 2 weeks after a big shooting, they all say this, they say that, but absolutely nothing's being done. We can start right here in maybe Newark, Newport, and other cities, follow us with this open carry law, and then we can go to Dover, and we can make the law in the state of Delaware, no open carry. It makes you feel uncomfortable when you're standing in line and somebody's got a gun on their side in front of you. I'm not afraid of him. I'm worrying about this idiot grabbing his gun and shooting the store up. Or him trying to play superhero and shooting at someone robbing the store and killing you or me or someone else. Now I'm asking council, as a citizen of Newcastle, to prohibit the open carry of firearms in the city limits. And I'm sure if you try hard enough, you can do it. And that's basically all I have tonight, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Victor, only the criminals will carry guns then.
Now, Johnny, we got to start forgetting about what this was going to
They gave you a gun. They sent you overseas to kill people. They can't take it away now, dude. Second Amendment. As hard as you try, you can't take it away.
All right, we'll do it.
You ain't going to do it in this town.
Good evening. Karen Whalen I live at 17 West 3rd. We have a question on an agenda item, and I may be behind the times. Other people seem to know a little bit more. My question is, what is the extra $675,000 earmarked for or targeted for?
It's targeted for, and this would be for their consideration, from 3rd Street to 6th Street, basically paving and curbs.
You're saying that there was a decision to expand the Delaware Street Improvement Project and you needed extra money?
Well, we've always wanted to do from the wharf to 6th Street. It's just finding the right amount of funding to complete the project. So it's always been in the scope. It's just at this point we only have the funding to 3rd.
So the original 1.789, I hear a lot of figures being thrown around, was for a section of Delaware Street that did not include this extra 675. I'm trying to understand why the project budget suddenly expanded.
The project, the amount of money that we got from the trust was used for multiple infrastructure projects. I'm going to ask the city administrator.
Well, you've completed, it's not a simple question of, basically you've completed this year roughly $940,000 in projects. And when the council requested the money, it did, the 1.82, approximately $1 million of that was to be earmarked for Delaware Street. And that was, as the council president said, from 3rd to the wharf. The additional funds for that money there's a $400,000 in the general fund that was earmarked a couple of years ago. That is for Delaware Street, so that puts you at about 1.4. And there was some additional funds that we received, community transportation funds that we received from Senator Poor's office, Mike Mulrooney's office at the time, and J.J. Johnson's office at the time. So that puts us at approximately, I'm speaking off the top of my head, but it's approximately $1.7 million. And the additional, to get you to the $2 million, council will be considering another loan basically from the state for the green infrastructure of about $300,000. Actually, that's been reduced to about $270,000. Again, depending upon what the actual green infrastructure cost is going to be. So to answer your question, approximately $1 million from the trust allocation is to go to Delaware Street.
I have to say that's very confusing. What would clarify it, and I think it would be appropriate, is that there would be something, is there a tally or some kind of a budget estimate tally that shows line by line item what all of this is for and who it's incoming from? It's very cloudy and it's a lot of money, and it's surprising to me that it seems to flow and adapt and morph this way. And every time I turn around in a different group, there's more money needed, and projects are being done, and they consistently come in underestimate, and then there's more money coming to the table. There's an ask for more money coming to that table. And I can tell you right now, you can expect that that's going to happen over and up there in the trustees meeting several months from now, when there's more money needed for the 3rd Street parking lot. It's just not going to be enough. And we watched it happen last week, where they just decided in their quarters that they were going to approve, with no estimate whatsoever in front of anyone, another $250,000. And then there's a catch-all budget item for landscaping, which will include this, that, and the other thing, and whatever was underestimated or decided to be thrown in. It just does not seem like an orderly, and consistent, and a proper way to run projects and city budgets and estimates. You got this money going on, you got more coming in tonight to be approved, and you got their side of the money, and then they'll be holding that, and you'll never see that. And I had to say that I agree with John DeMonte. It was my thoughts exactly that it does not seem like a very healthy way to fiscally run a city, and without that extra $2 million, I think the number was like $60,000 that you're have a little cushion for, and all this going on. Can the public FOIA or get the tally of the project costs as the project gets estimated and monies get spent? Is that available to the public?
But we've had meetings and discussed all these projects. We're constantly, evaluating projects as they occur. Sometimes we have adjustments, but we include contingency funding. So we've had open meetings and discussed it multiple times, and that information is
We've had
available.
numerous meetings where we've updated the additional costs that were allocated from an initial estimate for projects. And we also actually discussed again where it's not a simple we also discussed the fact that we had received for the 3rd Street project you're referring to, I think it was $119,000. Again, that didn't come from the trustees, that came from the state. But to try to capitalize it in a simple question that you're asking right now, as the council president said, we've been updating these on a regular basis when we've had the discussions about what we're doing with Delaware Street. And to your point, to the council president's point, we're still in engineering, and we won't know the exact amount of the project until a bid is let, and we're not at that stage yet. So these are all estimates, these are all projections. Right. Now, and in regard to whatever, maybe I'm overstepping my bounds, but in regard to what the trustees are doing, that's their business.
Right, but you partake of them. That's sort of a credit card, or if you will, or an account that's being tapped into, and who knows when you're going to go back to them again. But that's all conjecture. I've seen projects come in within a certain tolerance level, but within within 500,000 is not really a good tolerance level. These projects should be being looked at, estimated, and known far in advance, or at least further than what we do, what is going to be expected. To me, it's incredibly confusing that nobody seems to have a good handle. Maybe you do, but it's not available to us. Every time what we see another ask coming to the table for another approval of 500,000 or more. We're throwing around $500,000. It's just like that. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then in consideration of the appearance of not being fiscally all that healthy, in my opinion, I think that consideration should be given closely to throwing out extraneous things that most people don't really want or think that are needed anyway, like these silly bump outs. I mean, I think they're silly, and they don't really go with the character of the city anyway. And I'm sorry, that's not on the agenda item, but it is associated with this part and parcel of this discussion of monies. You should really scour through these and see what's needed and what's not. I mean, certainly that 3rd Street parking lot isn't needed, and the bump outs aren't needed either. It's just more money, and it's amazing.
Thank you for comments. Anyone else want to comment? So we could move along. Everyone would limit their comments to 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. We have several other things to do.
Phil Gross, 301 Moore Avenue. I recollect standing up here before this council over a year ago asking where can the scope of the project on Delaware Street go? And at that time, we could go a little further up if funds are available. And I think what mystifies me the most is that the money that you've earmarked, with more money coming in and outside funds, we're still studying, we're still looking, and not one thing other than curb and the handicap things have really been done. So I guess what I'm asking is, when do we start seeing results? When do we get hard numbers? Don't most companies and municipalities have the budget and everything done and rolling? At a certain point, 2 years later, nothing. We don't have any accounting for the money, and you're still saying, we're at $1 million more. What are you going to do with the rest of the money? And it's a big, deep hole.
Well, as you just stated, it's somewhat incorrect because projects have been completed with the funds that we have gotten. And that has been spoken to several times in council what has been done. So it's not that none of the money has been, none of the sitting there. There's stuff that has been done.
Right. Third Street's been done. You know, we're also working on
Third
several
Street's been
others.
done, Vault's been done.
Vault's been
You want-
done.
you can
Center.
They just need to be.
And I do have to apologize. I misspoke. I was referring more to the Delaware Street
Well,
project.
Delaware
so
Street-
I do have to apologize. I wasn't clear
We've
on
actually
that.
started on it. There was a bunch of drainage research we had to do, and that's, you know, we've already started the investigation work on that. So it's a very complicated project. It hasn't been done fully for many years, and we had to make sure we understood what was underneath the existing pavement. So we have already done some work, but when you do a major project like this, you want to do it step by step, and we're doing it the same way we do other projects, which is, you know, for council to approve, then it goes to design, then it goes to bids, and then we look at where we are. So it's really something, it's just a bigger project.
And to finish off, can the funds that have been spent, are they available for public viewing?
Yeah, we can tell you. Yeah, we can let you know what we've spent year to. In fact, I think it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also over $1 million in restricted funds for Delaware Street. It's been there for about 2 years. So the money's not just being spent; it's restricted for that in the treasurer's report tonight.
All right. Thank you.
All that's available to our
Bill.
citizens.
There's no worry. We're going to get the $600,000. The trust has plenty of money. After all, they're spending $2.5 million to put 32 parking spots. The $2 million they used to push it through by giving it to us, and then another $500,000 to build it. So $78,000 a parking spot. We could almost buy everybody an airplane.
Okay. Do we have any other comments? We need to move along with the agenda. You've already spoken. If you want to speak at the end again. Anyone else? Anyone else? We've already given you comments. We're going to move on. Has anyone else like to speak? We're going to move on with the agenda. Okay. At this point, we'll have comments. We'll have comment period later, but we do have to keep moving along. At this point, it's my pleasure to have for a motion for Resolution 2019-01. It's a resolution making an appointment to the Tree Advisory Commission. Do I have a motion?
So big.
Have a second?
No, what is it?
Second, but is Mr.
It's
Mr. Antonio here?
Yes, Mr. Antonio is here.
Oh, yeah,
So I'm going to read the resolution, and then we'll ask him to come forward. This is Resolution 2019-01. It's a resolution making an appointment to the Tree Advisory Commission. Thank you. Whereas the Newcastle City Council passed Ordinance 500 to amend and restate Chapter 74 relating to the Tree Commission and Chapter 210 of the Code of the City of Newcastle relating to street trees, creating the Tree Advisory Commission, and whereas pursuant to 74-1 of the Code, the Tree Advisory Commission shall consist of 5 members, each serving a 3-year term. 2 members will be appointed by the Mayor of Newcastle and confirmed by City Council, and 3 shall be appointed by City Council, and whereas members shall be selected on the basis of education, experience, or demonstrated interest in related fields, members need not be city residents. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby approves the appointment of the following person to serve on the Tree Advisory Commission for a 3-year term ending February 12, 2022. And this is John Antonio, who is currently a member of the Tree Commission. And we appreciate all that you've done for us.
Thank you.
It's a very important role in the city because we love our trees, and it's important that we maintain them and plant more of them. So at this point, is there any questions anyone has for Mr. Antonio?
No, just want to thank John for his past service and all that he and his family do for the community. John, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my
Appreciate
pleasure.
your signing up for this again. Thank you.
Anything you would like to say before we
No, I'm honored to do this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, appreciate it. Okay, all those in favor of Resolution 2019-01, appointing John Antonio, reappointing John Antonio to the Tree Commission. All those indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, you've been unanimously reappointed, so thank you. Now we're going to clap.
Thanks for showing up.
Okay. We're going to go to the last agenda item, which is Resolution 2019-05. It's a resolution to request a funding commitment from the trustees of the Newcastle Common. Do have a motion to consider.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Mr. Tarana, motion. Ms. Leary, second. I'm going to read the resolution, then we'll have a discussion. This is Resolution 2019-05. It's a resolution to request a funding commitment from the trustees of the Newcastle Common, whereas the City Council of the City of Newcastle wishes to state its gratitude for the $1,894,330 in funds the trustees of the Newcastle Common provided last year to the city for the repair and upkeep of certain roads located within the city, and whereas the city would also like to recognize the many recent contributions of funds from the trustees for the repair and replacement of handicapped curbs to the benefit of visitors and residents alike, and whereas the city has embarked on a major renovation of Delaware Street projected to cost upwards of $2 million, covering repairs from 3rd Street to the Wharf, and whereas the city would like to expand the scope of this project and renovate all of Delaware Street from 6th Street to the Wharf to capture economies of construction as well as to minimize the time disruption for the expanded project. And whereas renovating from Delaware Street to 6th Street is projected to cost an additional $675,000, and whereas the city requests that the trust consider funding the additional $675,000 in renovation costs for Delaware Street or for any other road project should the city get additional funds from the state for the purposes of further renovating Delaware Street. Therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Newcastle respectfully requests that the trust provide funding support and payments for a city loan in the amount of $675,000 in its upcoming fiscal year to fund the completion of Delaware Street and or additional infrastructure projects should the state provide additional funds for the completion of Delaware Street. The Council believes these improvements will be of significant benefit to the residents of the City of Newcastle past this 12th day of February 2019. At our last meeting, we discussed whether or not to propose something for the trust, and the interest was in trying to complete the Delaware Street project. City Administrator and I did meet with the Financial Subcommittee just to make a presentation on where we were on Delaware Street. And this is the time of the year where the city has a grant request where we would come forward and ask for their consideration. And basically what we're doing today is having a discussion about this proposed request to complete Delaware Street. Like I said, this Delaware Street is a once-in-a-lifetime project. We have received some money from the state specifically for Delaware Street. There's, no guarantee or indication that we will get any more money from the state. Sometimes we periodically get money for miscellaneous projects around the city, but we would like to proceed with $675,000 to finish the street in basically as one project. Is there any comments or discussion on this topic?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of it. I never passed the tin cup around. I always work for what I got, and the city ought to work for its money and to run its own operation. If you're comfortable going out in the street and begging for a couple dollars from the trust every time you want something, or when they want something, so you'll be sure to get it, go ahead. I'll never go trade people's neighborhoods and trade their values of their houses for a lousy $2 million you're going to spend on a street.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to ask maybe see if I can provide a little bit of clarity to some of the questions that were raised tonight. And I'll ask the treasurer and or the finance director or the city administrator to chime in if I've got everything. If I have something where I maybe don't have the flow of information or the numbers about right. But over time, the trustees have a history of contributing about $225,000, $250,000 to the city. I think that's a fair number that has proven to be historical over time. The infrastructure repairs that have been explained tonight and others, because we work off of a list with the city engineer and the building department, and they go out and they assess which streets need work first. So there's not what I want or not what anybody up here wants. It's what needs to be done based upon professional opinions. So that information is gathered and a list is created and the like. I can't explain what happened from 2000 to 2017 because I started my service here in April of 2017. But what I do know is there's an awful lot that's gone undone. So the scary part of all this is this stuff is prohibitively expensive. Just to do the work that we did on Balt Avenue, which was desperately needed, was in excess of $300,000. The expense of doing from 3rd Street to the wharf on Delaware Street, the estimates ranged anywhere from 1.4 to 1.8, depending upon the amenities that were added. I stated publicly, and I voted against adding any amenities personally because I felt like we didn't have the resources necessary to do anything with any amenities. I also received some input from Mr. Smith, who also said we have to be very mindful of the fact that any amenities could change the historical character of the street, of a historical street and a historical community. So I didn't support that. What I wanted to do was the most thrifty thing we possibly could do. If you do travel, however, from the traffic light at 6th all the way down, and there's a whole lot of residents that come in through that they either turn onto 5th and make a right and go on to 5th, or they come up to 4th and they make a left, or they go to 3rd and make a right. That stretch of road, not to mention the folks that live on that section of Delaware Street, the road's a disaster. It's bumpy, it's potholed, it's really, really in very rough shape, and hasn't been all it's been happening to it has been repaved from time to time. That's why you can't see the granite curbs, because the relief of them has basically disappeared with layer upon layer upon layer. To do all of this takes about $2 million. It's an incredible amount of money. When I talked to the finance director and I talked to the treasurer, we're a city that's got a budget of about $5.2 million. 3.7 of that is salary and benefits. And then when you look at the other costs that we have in terms of leases for police vehicles, insurance, and the like, we have very little unrestricted funds to set aside. And if we did set that money aside ourselves and save, we would be doing that for several years in order to take on a project of this size. And we would be doing that at the expense of not being able to dedicate anything to any other street or any other incident that may happen in the intervening time. So if the trust has a history of providing about $225,000 to $250,000 a year, this was a request for them to advance all of that at one time, so you would have all of that money at your hands, so you could then do the entirety of the street at one time. It's for economies of scale. As we all know, the old saying, cheaper to take your tools out just once. The thought here was, let's do the entire street. In my view, I really don't want to add any amenities. I've said that multiple times. I just want to take the street up, reset the curbs, do that which needs to be done, and do the whole thing at one time. It has been neglected for probably 2 or 3 decades, and it needs to be done, and it needs to be done right. This was their effort to say, okay, rather than year after year, we'll give you a stipend or a bit of money. We'll advance that to you at one time. Go do it and repair the whole thing. If there are other projects you can get done at the same time, terrific. But left to our own, that's a very daunting task because of the amount of money that we have in unrestricted funds every single year. Second, and let me conclude with this, the legislature is going through its JFC hearings right now. It will complete its budget work at the end of the state's fiscal year, which is June 30th, and the new fiscal year begins July 1st. And that is also consistent with ours. Am I correct, Ms. Carlin? We're June 30 to July 1, right? So we won't know what monies might be available from our state senator, the 2 state reps. We also don't know what those 2 state reps will do, to be very blunt, because they're brand new. they may have different priorities around their legislative district than perhaps Mr. Johnson and Mr. Mulroney had. So we are hard at work trying to cobble together the resources necessary to take on a project of this magnitude. And we hope someone won't have to really do this for another couple of decades because it's been ignored for a couple of decades. So for those reasons, not doing from 3rd to Delaware Street, which I think is kind of only doing half or 2/3 of what we should do, doing the entirety of the project makes a lot of sense. Not because it's a nice to do, but if you drive it and the residents that come in on those streets and then feed off in one direction or another, it needs to be done. So thank you very much.
Any other comments?
Well, you just made a perfect presentation on what is the problem. The problem is you only have $3 million in property taxes. That's your hard asset. That's your hard money every year. And you have 3.7 in just salaries and benefits. How the hell are you going to run a town like that? But yet nobody here wants to talk about, oh, can't we try to raise some revenue instead of going around begging for it? No. I brought forth time again, over and over and over. Nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to talk about that. No. Mrs. Bradford said, I'll never raise taxes. Well, how the hell can you give people a raise if you don't raise taxes? How can you have a constant of 3% on your labor force and not raise taxes? That's ridiculous.
Well, you misquoted me.
You said that.
I've said that we have not raised taxes since I've been on council. I did not say never. But
when I proposed a 0.5%, you said, I'll never raise taxes.
That's not our discussion topic. Our topic is specifically about a request to the trust, as Mr. Karana mentioned. This is a typical thing we have done many years. It's just like we go after grants. The trust has been very generous to the city on projects that benefit the citizens of the city. And so we're at that time of the year where we're saying to consider our request. And so that's what we're voting on tonight. So, any other comments?
The only comment I have is for the last year and a half, 2 years, we've talked about Delaware from 3rd to the wharf. 3rd to 6th Street was always kind of a gift or a thought or something. And like Michael said, if we're going to do it, let's do it right throughout the whole town. And that's what we're asking for. We are expanding the budget. But the only reason we're expanding the budget is because we're expanding the project. It's not like we went from 1.2 million to 2 million to whatever just because we're doing the same project. We're expanding the project also. So that's why the extra money is needed.
Okay. At this point, ready for a vote? Okay. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, please, for the city clerk.
Councilperson Adele Leary.
Yes.
Councilperson Michael Quantrill.
Yes.
Council President Linda Ratchford.
Yes.
Councilperson Mike Platt.
Yes.
Councilperson John A. Simondi.
No. Please record it correctly.
It'll be recorded as I know.
Not absent.
Okay. Thank you very much.
There's no disparagement on you. It's somebody else in the main office changed the wording of what I said.
So this resolution has passed 4-1. 4-1. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we go to comments on anything from the floor. Any concerns you have, Ms. Fisk? I think you asked first.
And I have Dorsey Fisk, 26 East 3rd Street. I want to ask the question that was actually germane to what you just voted on, and when I heard you read it, I read the resolution. It stated that if you get state funds, you still want the $675,000 for what?
It's for infrastructure. The caveat was we wanted to be clear. At this point, we don't have any state funds allocated toward Delaware Street than what they've already committed. There's no understanding that they will commit more. But it was just that caveat in case we did get funding then we would reinvest that infrastructure. This is a continuum. There's streets all over the city that
Of course,
need
I know that.
improvements.
Yeah.
And that would just be the sense that you would use it for additional infrastructure,
Mhm.
which at this point we know of no commitments to the city.
Have you any idea what you have asked the state for? How much?
They essentially tell us based on
Okay.
see what they do is they will get money allocated in this year's budget from when they finish the budget, typically on June 30th, and then at that point the secretary will follow the bond bill requirements, and each representative and each senator will then get a certain apportionment. Will get a certain apportionment, right? And then they'll have to make decisions about how they're going to apportion that within their district. And I don't think that's a particularly good way to do business, but that's the way the state does it.
Yeah.
Right. And there are really two pockets. One is the municipal street aid, which is a formula. Then the other is community transportation funds, and as Mr. Corona indicated, that's based on what they are interested in, what they, in their view, is best for the community. Like they did fund the 3rd Street as a drainage because there's a real concern about flooding there, and they have funded other projects. So at this point, that's all we know.
Thank you for the explanation. I also want to say that one of the things that several of the trustees, when I was on the board, were unhappy about was the, frankly, surreptitious way in which this was handled, which is not your fault. It was the fault of the trustee officers, apparently. They came and I remember when that was presented at the budget meeting, we got the information, we got Mr. Bellatel's letter, which he had sent, and that we got that on a Saturday, I believe, and our budget meeting was on a Monday, but you had sent it, the office had gotten it about 3 weeks ahead of time. So I'm just saying that this is something that concerns trustees, it also concerns other people in town, that this sort of underhanded behavior of the trustees, in my opinion, and sometimes a little bit opaque behavior of the council is disturbing. And I have one other comment, which I've talked several times to the city attorney, and he said that I would have to ask you all. I've several times said to him that he really needs to give a tutorial to all the commissions of the city, because a lot of them don't really seem to know what they're supposed to be doing. And it's really not their fault. I mean, the Planning Commission, for instance, when someone goes on the Planning Commission, unless that person is an engineer or someone of that ilk, they really don't know an awful lot. And I think it's really important that they are instructed. We actually had years ago on HAC, we had it was a FOIA tutorial. But it really is important that, shall we say, the Planning Commission know what the Planning Commission is supposed to be doing and what their parameters are. So I hope you'll do that. Thank you.
I'd like to respond. I think that's, as a former chairman of the Planning Commission myself and a member of the Historic Area Commission, that is very good advice, and we should do that on a regular basis. The Planning Commission, by virtue of what's laid out in code, has very, very, very limited discretion. They're to follow the zoning map. If somebody comes in with a plan and by right, under the zoning code, wants to improve a property, and by right, they have certain property rights, the Planning Commission can't tell them that they can't do it. They can work with them about the parameters of the project and ask them about amenities. But by right, that property owner has every right to improve their property, provided it comports with the zoning code. So you're right. They have very limited authority, extremely limited authority, as does the Historic Area Commission. I would say that HAC has probably a bit more because it's a bit more interpretive, but planning is relatively constrained. But your point is absolutely right.
Thank you.
We should do that probably on a frequent basis because I think it's important for not just the commission members to hear it and understand it and digest it, but I also think it creates a level of mistrust with the public when they feel that the Planning Commission or the Historic Area Commission has certain authorities that frankly, they just don't have. And I'll tell you, by contrast, folks, if you look at the silliness of Newcastle County government, where they vote, they politicize every bit of development. They vote on every single bit of development. And it is a complete disaster because you get now the influence of developers, the influence of cause groups, and it's the collision of all of this. And sometimes you might feel that you're on the winning side, but other times you could feel you're on the losing side, but because it's not done in an orderly process. So I think your point's a good one, and thank you for making that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the reasons I brought this up was because I noticed in the Planning Commission, when there was the meeting about a special exception, one of the commissioners said, well, we can't tell people what to do with their property. Well, this was a special exception to change the zoning. And I was astonished that this person seemed not to understand what his responsibilities were. And I will also say it's quite possible that some people haven't gotten around to reading what their responsibilities are, because I know on the trustees, some of them have never really done much about reading the bylaws. I worked on them for years. So, thank you. I hope that will happen.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Mr. Smith, you haven't commented.
Russ Smith, 219 Chestnut Street. I had some reservations about the landscaping on Delaware Street, the changes, and I had suggested that the council and the city consult with the State Historic Preservation Officer, and I'm very pleased to see that you did. I'm not sure I completely agree with the SHPO, but the SHPO is the SHPO. That's the final word, and good going. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for your comment.
Through all these conversations about the finances, would it be a fair summation to say that there are just too many projects for the money that's available and the money runs out before the projects do? I mean, I heard a lot of talk about expensive projects and needing to re-up the ante and go out and request more money from the state and this entity and the trustees. And is that a fair assessment that there really is a need to consider almost the necessity of a project and making sure that you get the most bang for your buck out of the money that you do have available before it runs out?
Well, we're constantly evaluating projects and also things that we need to do beyond infrastructure. And that's the job of council, is to prioritize those. And we've had, many conversations about our street priorities. And so at this point, we're just going through execution. But we are always, certainly, the chief talked earlier about grants that they have to improve, DUI and speeding to catch people doing that. So we do pursue outside funds. It's a good thing for the city. But I don't think that there's any indication that we're not just doing what is normal for a city municipality to do.
No, and thank you. I understand that. I'm just saying, are there ever any concerns that the money is going to run out before the projects do? I mean, certainly there have to be a tremendous number of projects needed going on in this city, and the money could be spent ad infinitum if you had it. Is that true?
Well, we have a rolling list of projects which the building inspector keeps and works with, they constantly update that. And so we look at that every year during our budget cycle. So we don't start a project until we think we have the money to complete the project. So We're not like just doing projects and hoping the money comes in. We budget for the project.
Okay. But I'm just asking about looking at, money doesn't grow on trees. Money, projects, there's so many. Mike, go ahead.
Sorry. And in the estimates that we get, there's always about a 20% contingency because as we tear up Delaware Street, hasn't been taken down to the base layer in a couple of decades, so we're not sure what we're going to find. So there's always a contingency that's built in because for the reasons you point out.
So it seems to me that the essence of fiscal responsibility would be to use one test of whether a project should go forward is it needed?
Absolutely.
Do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's absolutely justified?
We've got a list from the city engineer and the city inspector who are constantly going out and looking at things. And frankly, from their vantage point, I'm not going to put words into Mr. Bergman's mouth, but he's basically said essentially, he's got things on the list that for decades have gone passed over by previous councils that we're now getting to. Mm-hmm. But at the great expense of what we're having to stand up to do.
If a project is not needed or not justified, you would consider scrapping it or not doing it?
Absolutely.
What about the 3rd Street parking lot, which has never been justified?
That's a difference of opinion that we have.
It's not an opinion. The ordinance was passed on the premise that the parking was needed. So I'm asking you.
We can always go to the trustees and tell up our credit card.
Linda, did the traffic study, the parking study justify the need for that lot?
The council has voted on
did
the
the
need
traffic,
for
did the parking,
2 councils have voted on the need for parking.
Was the lot justified?
Based on the research that's done, council has voted on the parking lot issue.
Was it justified is the question I asked.
I believe there is a need for parking, yes.
Did the studies justify it is my question. That's a yes or no question. Did it justify it? Yes or no?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The ordinance was passed foundationally on the premise that the study said that a parking lot was needed. I'm asking you now, with all the time spent in retrospect to review, was that study correct? Did that study say that parking was needed?
Ordinance 510 was a process.
I understand that.
This council voted to approve a parking lot in any residential area. So they had carte blanche to put it anywhere.
Right. And then
Can you
out of that
imagine
magic,
doing that?
black.
Can you imagine saying you could put a residential
That's
parking
amazing
lot
to me
in any
in this
residential
historic city. But out of that magic black box, it turned into, boom, 3rd Street parking lot. And it was said, well, that's justified because the study said. So did the study say that it's justified? I'm trying to save you. What I'm going to tell you in my crystal ball is $1 million. And that's not. And if you say, oh, that's the trustees, that's all of yours because that's the public coffers. And if you ask them to spend it, you're basically aiding and abetting that expenditure.
We've gone through the parking lot discussion. I really can't.
But I'm a public. I'm a citizen. I'm a resident. You're a representative of government. You're supposed to be. I'm asking the question: was that lot justified?
Council
yes or no?
Council loaded on parking at a prior council before this council. So it has been in our comprehensive plans since 2009. So that's the only answer I can give you.
But you won't give me the direct answer, yes or no.
I did give you the direct
I know the answer. It wasn't justified. That ordinance was passed on the House. That's not an opinion. That's a quantified fact.
That's your opinion. We appreciate it, and there were two votes by council. One was on the parking lots, which was several years ago.
Transparent.
And the most recent was a process.
Ma'am.
So I think we appreciate you coming. We'll go to the next person if someone else has
I appreciate you not being truthful, and everybody sees it, Linda. And I have a right to comment. I'm a resident, and it affects me, and you're spending money to the tune of that parking lot will be $1 million by the end of this, I assure you. Maybe more. This is relevant, and this is appropriate, and I'm going to continue to comment on it. And you can see that this woman who's supposed to represent the individuals will not truthfully answer the question.
Has she gone over her 3 minutes?
Yeah, I think so.
I so everybody can see. Linda, why don't you just say no and turn to an honest person tonight and say, no, it wasn't justified.
You can't stand up here and insult people. That is not called for. I gave you an honest answer. You didn't like the answer, that we just have to agree to disagree.
Deal 26 Strand. I'm here tonight to talk about two things. They both are under the topic of waste. Number one is a little lighter topic. and that is dog waste. There have been a number of instances of dog waste that have been found in the parks, on the streets, on the sidewalks. I know a number of residents have complained about it. My wife talked to the trustees last week, and I talked to one of the owners of the newspaper just this week, who said that she was going to have a conversation with Mrs. Leary to see what could be done in cooperation with the trust as to putting dog waste containers, signs, bags in various spots around the community.
So do you want to know where I am on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I also work, so okay, I can't always pay attention to city business when I'm on my job. But I have sitting a little bit more research to do, but I'm sending a consideration to the trust, to the Board of Health, and to the city, so trying to hit all parties, with suggestions for some kind of facility, kind of what you were talking about.
Containers, signs,
right?
bags.
There are containers, and they will have, not they will, but containers that also have, where you can pull a bag down.
Got any
There's
part,
a
any
lot of
elimination.
there's actually a lot of variety about this, and I didn't really know it. And one of the things I was especially looking at is a waste container that will prohibit people putting other unassociated waste in it, like someone trying to shove in their McDonald's bag or their leftovers.
Burning cigarettes.
Whatever, yeah. So, and then there's those different ways that the little bags can come down. They can come down more than one. They can come down one at a time. So that is going to go out, and I would probably say after I have surgery, about a week and a half from now, it will probably go out to everyone then.
Okay. Spring cleanup, in other words. So my next comment is about waste of fiscal nature. We've talked tonight about funding. I attended along with other people, attended the trustees meeting last week. And it seems that the trust is sort of a piggy bank for the city, if you will. And we've talked about a lot of issues. Mr. Carrata talked about the normal $252,000 per year that the city gets from the trust. Now we're at somewhere around $3 million. The question is, if the trust does all this in one shot, where are the needs going to be met for the $250,000 going forward? Which brings me to the parking lot. Now, we also learned that the parking lot will cost another $250,000. Now we're at $4.25 or thereabouts. People I've talked to have said that by the time the parking lot is in, 32 spaces at $30,000 roughly is pretty close to $1 million when you have that 20% contingency. Now, where else could the city, with the trustees' backing, spend $1 million as opposed to wasting it on a parking lot which has no justification? I ask you that. And I'm sure you could all come up with a lot of good answers. Global warming, the rise in the sea level. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal today about Virginia waterfront. Well, Delaware's not much different. Someday, that river is going to come well into this city. It hasn't done it since roughly Sandy, but it'll happen. We're not prepared. What are you doing about the waterfront? Anybody?
No, it's good. Yeah, Mr. Beal, that's a very good question, and that should be a priority without a doubt. I mean, we've had a lot of focus.
As mayor, will you push that through?
Absolutely. I do my level best because you are spot on accurate. I've had this conversation with Ms. Fisk. I mean, that is an enormous risk. I mean, we don't need 6th Street to be the new riverfront. Right. Now, it's a very fair point. I mean, the science is there. Whether people want to, agree or disagree, the facts are that is a big threat, and it's something that we need to dedicate our time and attention to.
We have spent time and continue to spend time on this topic.
Spend some money on a bulkhead. Don't think about it. Do it. $1 million would be a good down payment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
My name's Roderick Gillespie. I have a short comment. Someone else brought this up. We employ a city engineer at considerable cost. The name of this engineer is AECOM, which is a very expensive firm. Now, concerning parking in the city, they issued under their name, they issued a report that included parking. It said, goal number 2, principles, using the following guiding principles. 1, improve utilization of existing parking spaces before creating new parking spaces. In other words, use the ferry, use the one at 3rd Street, or build a new one down at the recycling center. 2, minimize vehicular traffic in the historic area. 3, enhance pedestrian and bicycling experience that may be irrelevant to this parking lot. 4, minimize impacts on residential quality of life. 5, minimize impacts on businesses with the historic district. 6, finally, enhance the community's overall character and minimize environmental impact for any of the new parking facilities in the historic district. Now, that 3rd Street parking lot is in opposition to the recommendations of your own engineer who you spent a lot of money on. I understand there was supposedly a study done by the University of Delaware.
No, Mr. Gillespie, let me stop you right there.
No, I have a First Amendment.
I want to talk about that.
I have a First Amendment right to speak.
You do, but can I at least explain?
And it goes back 400 years.
Yes, sir. But please, indulge me this one time.
Fine. You can't say you indulge me. I have a right to speak.
I get it, but I'm asking you to
indulge me. I'm going to make it short, and I'll get it all out.
No.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay.
We'll have an interchange.
For maybe the 50th time, the Jonathan Justice, who works, actually I spoke to the class today. He has a senior capstone project class of students. The task of the students at that time was not to determine whether we needed parking or not. It was not. I had conversations with folks about how many, we have a lot of, within a defined residential area of downtown, as the chief knows, most of our streets are unmarked. Simple math. It was send the students out and go, if you marked every single street, how many parking spots could you get legally, as defined by Delaware Code, on each individual street? And then separately, if you could get from the State Motor Vehicle Department, how many vehicles are registered in that same study area? Simple math. That is the beginning, middle, and end to what those well-meaning 5 seniors in college did. It was not a parking study. So please, thank you for indulging.
The reason I'm saying it, apparently it's been used as it shouldn't have been, but
no.
The president of city, let me speak now.
Sure.
The president of city council wrote a letter to the president of the trustees, Henry Gampagorta, and she said that this was justified by a study, and would you please give us $175,000 or whatever it was, our estimate. The problem is this thing that some people call a study, and they actually call it a project, which is an honest thing to say. Mm-hmm. They say something very explicit. They say this: after gathering information and conducting research, our team's main recommendation to the Planning Commission would be support of a parking lot that is already proposed behind the M&T Bank near Battery Park. I believe this was used to justify borrowing them or taking the money from the trustees. Now, I think this is a false it is false to use this report if that is the report. It apparently conflicts with your own engineer. Now, I am convinced this is a false report because I've had a FOIA request in since November 16th of last year to have a copy of that contract for that activity by those students. And I've also had a request in for the paid invoice. If this is a study, a real study, someone made a proposal to you and you paid them money and you signed the proposal. So in other words, it's a free thing.
The information, what I have is what you asked for the other day, which was for the...
No, that's another thing.
Well,
That's an estimate for it, $175,000.
May I speak?
Yes, absolutely.
So what I have from you the other day is the request for that proposal. Okay, and I've gone back through email to find that, and your request said that you quoted the council or the president of the trustees that he had mentioned $175,000 that was quoted from the city.
This is a side issue. You're diverting me from what I was talking about. This student project, that's what they call it. Now I'd like to rebut what Mr. Barthel's saying. That I've asked you for that, a copy of it. It's claimed to be a study. I say it's not a study. It is a sheaf of papers that somebody used to justify a letter to write to the trustees to get $175,000.
There were other studies. There was working with Will Mapco, their actual parking counts, working with some volunteers, granted, but working with Will Mapco, which has expertise in this matter. And I would tell you that all the things you mentioned, I think the city has been doing, and I think it's basically a progress. We're doing some special things on events for parking out at Broad Dyke. We've done special things there. So I will tell you, we are working on all of those things. The trust has supported the building of parking lots that most of them are used primarily by residents in many areas in the city. The trust has their own decision-making process. We're talking about the city, and I'm telling what the city approved.
Well, you sent a letter to Henry Gambagorda saying that a study, I believe those are the words. I have the letter in a file at home. Your words, you signed it asking for that money for the parking lot. It was justified.
He asked me the question about the parking lot, and I gave him the information the city had worked on. And yes, I would use the word study because there was a study done. There have been more
Which
than
study
one
was that?
It's all on the website. You can look on the website.
No, I've already looked at it and I've reproduced it here. You know, this is being made too difficult. I have the AECOM study here. I also have this so-called student project, and it's a project. If that was what was used, then that was, in a sense, a false report being used to get money from the trustees.
Mr. Gillespie, I applaud Mrs. Radford. She got $2 million to push through a little parking lot. She's like a financial genius.
Mrs. Radford,
I think we're done.
No, I have one more statement. The parking lot, I estimated this using very simple things I found on the internet. The cost of that parking lot, I won't tell you what it is, but it's going to be more than what's already been appropriated, conservatively. It's going to be one of the most expensive parking lots.
We're done. We're done. You can go on our website and look at the parking
I've used my First Amendment rights. Thank you very much.
Council justified the parking lot. So,
thank you.
Anyway, thank you. Any other comments? We're going to wrap this up and go to adjournment real quickly. Thank you. You could identify yourself.
Sign in first. Hi, my name is Joanna DeMonde, and I reside at 12 Dolby Alley. I just moved here, so I can still be objective. And there's 2 points I'd like to make. First of all is transparency. It just seems as if the citizens in the city of Newcastle are confused at exactly what has been going on, and especially about the parking. The other thing is that there's an election coming up, and couldn't that be put on as a referendum for people to vote on it? As I said, there's a lot of pros and cons. People have a lot of misconceptions, so a little more transparency would help, and also put it on a referendum on the vote and see exactly what people want. Thank you.
Thank you. I will also say the trust maintains where you park your car. That's a public parking lot at the end of Dalby Alley.
Excuse me?
The trust maintains that parking lot at the end of Dalby Alley, and I would say most residents of Dalby Alley really like
You have to
it.
speak up a little bit more.
You moved into Dalby Alley?
Yeah.
There's a parking lot at the end. It's maintained by the trust.
Well, I thank you very much.
Yes, so
But
you thank the
but
trust because they
but
maintain that.
It is a public parking lot, so, whenever anybody wants to park in my space, they can do it. So when I understand that, and that's one of the down things, but there's also a lot of perks about living at 12 Dalby Alley.
And it's a great place
Thank
to
you.
live. It's a beautiful place, but that is just another parking area. Okay. Thank you for the comments, Ed. At this point, I'm going to ask for an adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. We are